Section 4 of The Elements of Style by William Strunk. A few matters of form. Okay, so headings leave a blank line or its equivalent in space after the title or heading of a manuscript. On succeeding pages, if we're using ruled paper, begin first line. Numerals do not spell out dates or other serial numbers. Write them in figures or Roman notation as may be appropriate. August 9th, 1918. Here, 9th of August 1918 might fit in certain cultures and countries and whatnot. I know that in the US, this is the most common. I rarely see this. But, it all depends. I mean, maybe on a website or a global website or a website that has to do with time, like Greenwich Mean Time, or has different times reflected. I mean, it just depends on the venue. A lot of these choices depend on the venue, and so just as long as you've got a good reason, then I think that you can also perhaps not 100% adhere to what Strunk is saying here. I'd say the high 90s is probably shrewd, but once in a while, you know, I mean, here he says, you can use this or this. I don't think this is good if maybe if you're writing, about some other time, 50, 100, couple hundred years ago, or different, or thousands of years ago, different place. But if it's recent and you're in the U.S., I think, if it's like a normal essay, I think this is pretty standard. So just keeping all that in mind, the venue. Rule 3, Chapter 12, 352nd Infantry, etc. A sentence containing an expression in parenthesis is punctuated outside of the marks of parenthesis, exactly as if the expression in parenthesis were absent. The expression within is punctuated as if it stood by itself, except that the final stop is omitted unless it is a question mark or an exclamation point. I went to his house yesterday, parenthesis, my third attempt to see him, but he had left town. He declares, and why should we doubt his good faith, that he is now certain of success. So, I like this. This is more for sort of fiction writing or creative writing. With regards to essay writing, I'm not a huge fan of a lot of parentheses. I think parentheses are really helpful, perhaps if it's a first person narrator. I went to his house yesterday and I'm going to be introducing you to these characters and all that stuff, like Holden Caulfield and Catcher in the Rye, or, um, you know, Frank McCourt's character, I believe, in Angela's Ashes and Tis. Um, first person. I went to his house yesterday. You could use a lot of parentheses. It kind of fits. It's kind of funny. It's kind of colloquial. Um, it's friendly. It's more informal. But I think when you're trying to write formal writing, I don't think a lot of parentheses is helpful. I think it actually detracts from really quality writing, especially in this way. But these are more sort of conversational sentences anyways, and it's talking about narrative, like action. So it doesn't really feel like it's pulled from a formal literary essay. So this is just another example. But all right. So I wouldn't overuse parentheses. I think it's helpful. But structurally, this is how to use them. You want to put the parenthesis inside and then the comma is outside. Or the question mark is going to be inside the parenthesis. And then you've got the sentence with the period, concluding the sentence out here. Formal quotations, cited as documentary evidence, are introduced by a colon and enclosing quotation marks. The provision of the Constitution is no tax or duty shall be laid on articles exported from any state. I agree. Colon, enclosing quotation marks. The other thing is usually going to capitalize this first letter. And if it's not capitalized, then you can put brackets and then capitalize it and perhaps put dot 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 if it's in the middle of a sentence. If this is pulled from the middle of a sentence of the source material. Quotations grammatically in apposition of the direct object of verbs or preceded by a comma and closing quotation marks. I recall the maxim of La Rochefoucauld: gratitude is a lively sense of benefits to come. Yeah, this is very common as well. It comes up a lot using a comma, quotation marks, double quotation marks. You could use a colon, um, or you could use a comma here. Either one is fine. Aristotle says art is an imitation of nature. Um, and this is a little bit more conversational. Here this is the provision of the Constitution is. It's like a definition. It seems a lot more formal. So the 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 colon here. But then here it just seems a little bit more conversational. I recall the maximum like as if you were drinking coffee together in the corner of some quiet bookstore. I recall the maximum of La Rochefoucauld: gratitude is a lively sense of benefits to come. So I think the comma fits there. It's a little bit less formal, more conversational. Aristotle says art is an imitation of nature, and then also here because that's so short. I think it might fit, the comma as well. Aristotle says is really short, and it's obviously not like a definition. The blank 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 is, but I think it just fits. So again, it has to do with the venue. It has to do with sort of what looks right or what looks best, and quotations of an entire line or more of verse are begun in a fresh line and center, but need not be enclosed in quotation marks. Wordsworth's enthusiasm for the revolution was at first unbounded, colon. And then here are your quotes. Yes, this comes up a lot when you're writing your literary essays or any essay where you're pulling quotes from source material and other material, and or other material. You want to begin on a fresh line and center. You don't need to enclose it in quotation marks. But yeah, you definitely want to skip a line here. And then, so if your essay is double spaced, you want to still have that double space, but then you want these to not be double spaced. That's the other thing you want to remember. Now, different teachers have different rules, though. So I'm not going to say, oh, well, this should supersede the rule of your teacher or your professor. But so make sure you find out. But this is generally a good standard format because you're generally going to turn papers in that are double spaced. Times New Roman 12 font. It's generally what is recommended, and generally you want it to be structured in this way. You don't have to put quotation marks. Quotations introduced by that are recorded as in indirect discourse and not enclosed in quotation marks. Keats declares that beauty is truth, beauty. So yeah, so the fact that he says that, Keats declares that beauty is truth, beauty. So you don't have to put that in quotes because you're using that. Proverbial expressions and affirmative phrases of literary origin require no quotation marks. These are the times that try men's souls. He lives far from the madding crowd. The same is true of colloquialisms and slang. Again, a lot of it has to do with the venue. I will reiterate here. It's all about the venue. It's all about what looks right, what feels right. Normally, you're not going to have quotation marks, but depending on how you're using these, the phrases, colloquialisms and slang, the same thing. If you want to use the phrase, the slang phrase, bay, there are a lot of slang phrases. That's probably going to be old by the time this video comes out, but there are a lot of slang phrases that that might be in use that you might want to italicize, and or put quotation marks around it. It just depends on what you as a writer feel is going to be the best way to communicate that message that you want to the reader. And we're going to have a lot of examples in other videos where we go over that a lot more thoroughly. So this isn't, you know, like burned in stone. Like this has to be, you know, these are the only rules. You know, it's a good guidebook, but again, it has to do with what venue and what are you trying to communicate specifically. So thank you guys very much. We'll go over the rest of a few matters of form in the next video. Thanks a lot.